everyone, in this video I will talk about why I am an anti-natalist. This is just my opinion and I'm not saying that every anti-natalist thinks the same way, and if I say something and the shoe doesn't fit, don't wear it. I am directing this video to those who want or wanted to have children, and I am excluding those who don't have access to sex education, birth control, sterilization, legal abortions, or those who have been or are being forced to have children against their will. So let's begin. Anti-natalism is a philosophical position that assigns a negative value to birth and therefore is against the reproduction of new human beings. Anti-natalists argue that people should abstain from procreating because they consider it to be morally incorrect. I want to clarify that one thing is to not want to continue living once you're already here, and another thing is to wish you were never born or to be against procreation with the focus on prevention. And for me, this also includes abortion at any point of the pregnancy. But in both cases, prevention or abortion are voluntary. I personally think that under certain circumstances, it's moral for prevention or abortion to be forced or obligatory, but I will not be talking about this today. There are many reasons why I think it's unethical, unnecessary, and harmful for humans to reproduce, and these are just some of them. I am an anti-natalist because I don't have the right to impose life on someone else without his consent. I cannot or should not create a being that is going to suffer and die if I can't ask him first if he wishes to have this experience or not. It is very clear to me that not because I can or want to give life means that I should give life. Because if that child doesn't want to be here, I won't be able to undo the harm and return him to the void. Perhaps many think, well, if it's going to be my child, then it is my choice and therefore my right to have him. But you cannot say it is only your choice when there is going to be someone else involved and or affected by your decision, because you are not making a teddy bear. You are creating a sentient being that didn't ask you to be born and that might hate the lot in life that you gambled for on his behalf. The fact that you are happy with your life does not mean that your kids will or should be happy with theirs. I think most people give absolute positive value to life, and many times they might deny, disqualify, or not even consider the negative parts of it, or they will count it as something positive. So they conclude that human life and its perpetuation can be seen as a net positive, and therefore they can't understand how anyone can think differently. And if you add to this the beliefs that existence is better than non-existence, or that you must reproduce because it is a divine command, or that children are a blessing and that you won't be fulfilled until you have them, or that life is sacred and prevention, contraception, or abortion are sins or crimes and therefore they must be forbidden, etc., I can understand how difficult it is for some people to see life and its value objectively if they see these beliefs as absolute truths and not simply as popular opinions. When people call us crazy for not wanting to have kids, perhaps it's their own conscience exposing their insanity that they project onto us. Because who is the crazy one? The one who doesn't want to cause unnecessary harm to another? Or the one who deliberately is the direct or indirect cause of suffering and death for someone else? I would think the answer is obvious. There are many people who say that death is a punishment, a curse, or the worst thing that could ever happen to anyone. But if death is so horrible, why do you defend and impose the cause of this supposed evil? For many people, it almost seems as if there is a disconnect. They think that they are only the givers of life and happiness, but they don't seem to understand that with every birth, they are also the givers of suffering and death. Some might say that whatever happens to their children is God's will, but I find it unacceptable to put the blame on imaginary beings for the horrors you inflict on your children. For example, if your child is playing in the middle of the street and a car runs him over and kills him, you might think that this was not your fault because you are not the one who ran him over. And you might even feel like the victim. But you were the one who brought him into this world, knowing very well that this was a possibility. So no, you are not the victim. You are one of the perpetrators. Even though you're not the one giving your kids illnesses or running them over, you are the one putting them in harm's way, so you must take responsibility for that. You cannot take credit for the good without taking responsibility for the bad. That's not how this shit works. Which makes me wonder how many people, before having kids, think about what kind of death their kids can possibly have and how long and painful they can be. Because I find it very foolish to only think about the arrival of a new baby and not also consider the possible quality of his life and of his death. Many people absurdly believe that they have the right or even the duty to create more humans willy-nilly and without restrictions. And they feel extremely proud of it as if it were a great achievement. And they feel like heroes worthy of admiration, praise, and eternal gratitude. For me, reproducing is something that ought to cause shame, not pride. Because by doing so, you are showing your senselessness, selfishness, and inability to comprehend that 1, you don't have the right to do so, therefore it is unethical, and 2, that you are bringing a child into this world to suffer and die, and therefore it is malevolent and cruel. I wonder if you would place your toddler on a mechanical ride that you know doesn't work properly, where he can die crushed or decapitated, and where nobody comes out of it alive. Would it be worth doing so just for the joy both of you might get out of it? If you wouldn't do it, then why do you want to bring him into this world, knowing that this life is this defective ride where nobody comes out of it alive? Are you going to wash your hands saying that it's just part of life? Or that it's not your fault because your God ordered you to do it? Or that everyone else does it and you want to do the same? What is your excuse? And I say excuse because I don't see a good reason to do so. I think that nature has given us a powerful instinct to perpetuate life because its purpose is reproduction, not the well-being or happiness of anyone. So I feel that through falling in love or through the maternal or paternal instinct, it manipulates us and blinds us to the cruel and savage reality of life. Because if we were truly aware of it, this would keep us from creating more humans, and this is obviously against its purpose. Many people have told me, if you say you wish you wouldn't have been born and you don't want to have any kids, it's because you obviously don't know how to live. You are not strong or capable enough to face and handle life and all its challenges. You are a coward, a negative, bitter, ungrateful person that needs psychological help because you are advocating for humanity to go extinct. To me, this would be like telling a slave, if you are unhappy, it's because you obviously don't know how to be a good slave. You are too weak and are unable to handle and make something good out of the injustices, abuse, and beatings you receive from your master. You do nothing but complain and say that you don't want to bring more slaves into this world to suffer just like you. You are so ridiculous and selfish, and you should be grateful to your parents for bringing you into this world because everyone knows it is far better to exist and be a slave than to never have existed at all. I hope I made my point clear. I personally see this life as a combination of prison, slavery, torture chamber, and Disneyland. And most people are mesmerized or even hypnotized by the park's beauty, and they don't seem to be bothered one bit by the other 3. Many people naively believe that their dreams will come true because they think they have control over their life and the future, so they confidently reproduce, not realizing that this supposed control is an illusion and not reality. So it's hard for me to understand how someone can defend procreation knowing that their wishes, dreams, or good intentions are almost irrelevant, since these are not the ones that are going to determine the happiness, well-being, or quality of life of their child. Because life is unpredictable, and tomorrow you can die and leave your kids homeless or at the care of others that might mistreat, abuse, or even rape them. Or perhaps you might get divorced or become ill or disabled, so you won't be able to care for them like you thought you would. Also, many hope or assume that their kids will be born healthy and strong. But I think that any future parent must consider the problems, illnesses, or disabilities their children might be born with or might later suffer from. To begin, he might be premature and be for several weeks or months in an incubator connected to machines with tubes and wires throughout his body, and he might even need one or several surgeries when he is only days, weeks, or months old. Or maybe he is born with one of many types of dwarfism or with a physical deformity that can cause him insecurities, pain, discomfort, or make his life difficult. Or perhaps your child may be born or become blind, deaf, mute, monoplegic, hemiplegic, or have spina bifida, cerebral palsy, or one of many forms of muscular dystrophy. Or have autism, Down syndrome, hemophilia, Rett syndrome, sleep disorders, Tourette syndrome, juvenile Huntington's disease, Hurler syndrome, epilepsy, harlequin ichthyosis, Sanfilippo syndrome, Batten disease, Jarcho Levin syndrome, progeria, Leigh syndrome, allergies, asthma, etc. Or perhaps he'll suffer an accident that will leave him paraplegic or quadriplegic. Or he might suffer burns that will deform his face or body. Or perhaps because of an illness or accident, they might need to amputate one or several of his limbs. And you will be responsible for each and every one of his ailments because you are the one who brought him into this world. But don't worry, if your child doesn't have any of the things I just mentioned, perhaps he might be born with or develop a new and incurable disease. And you will have to see him suffer because there will be no way to heal him. But that doesn't matter, of course, because you think it is worth the risk, right? Of course it is! Perhaps many people say, if I have a child with an illness, disability, degenerative disease, etc., I will be okay with that. So if I'm going to be okay with it, then that's all that matters. I wonder how many of you have actually considered how your child is going to feel. How many have asked yourself, will my child be okay with any disorder or disability he may have, or any amount of pain he may have to endure, or because of a handicap, live his entire life completely dependent on me? Do you think it's just about what you want, think, and feel, and not about what he may want, think, and feel? Or do you absurdly assume that regardless of the circumstances in his life, he will or should be grateful to be alive? I truly believe that many children are not happy and wish they were dead or that they wouldn't have been born. But they act like everything is okay because they don't want to make their parents feel guilty, or they don't want to be called ungrateful, or deal with the criticism of those who think they are delirious and need to see a psychiatrist for thinking this way. If you think that life is wonderful, good for you. But perhaps your children might not share that sentiment, nor do they have to. I get the impression that many future parents stupidly believe they'll be able to solve any problems that might arise, knowing very well that many won't have a solution instead of focusing on preventing them. For these people, prevention sounds completely ludicrous instead of logical. Many never stop to think if it's a good idea or even moral to reproduce. They just assume they should, so they do. Another reason why I am against natalism is because many people, due to physical, mental, emotional, financial, or other issues, clearly should not have children. Many don't have the slightest idea how to educate them so that these people benefit society instead of being a burden or a menace to it. And also because many parents are abusive or irresponsible and their children end up suffering greatly because of it. Many people think that the only requirements to having children is to be able to create them and that they don't starve to death. But other than that, they don't really care about your safety, your physical, mental, or emotional health, your sex education, or your personal and social responsibilities. Many don't teach you to be polite, helpful, considerate, kind, honest, humble, patient, tolerant, trustworthy, punctual, clean, organized, disciplined, to be a good listener and a good communicator, and to respect the body, the space, the belongings, and the rights of others. Your child is born without most of these qualities, so you have to almost forcefully turn him into something that he is not. And nothing guarantees that you will achieve it because he's still an animal no matter what, and because you don't have control over the future nor the influence that others will have over him. I also believe that many people are unhappy and unfulfilled, and they have kids because they think this will give them joy, without considering that perhaps nature has programmed that need and emptiness in us in order to continue reproduction. And many end up realizing that this was nature's trap and that it was a mistake having children. But even when having a child will give you happiness, If he is miserable or suffering, I ask if it was fair to bring him into this world only to satisfy your selfish needs and to fill your emptiness. I think many parents want to ignore the problems, misery, or pain of their kids because acknowledging it would make them realize that they are the ones to blame, and they rather continue living in denial of the great harm they have caused them. Or they rather put the blame on the Lord, other people, or fate. Anything but take responsibility for it. I'm against procreation because there is a high possibility that the life of any new being will have or be full of pain, suffering, dissatisfaction, stress, hunger, anxiety, anguish, instability, loneliness, sadness, depression, rejection, guilt, shame, regret, troubles, tragedies, discrimination, injustice, abuse, etc. But it seems that people justify the continuation of this irrational and painful, vicious cycle of life because they think it's necessary or because they expect that the good that comes out of it will be worth it. I assume that many people have kids because they think they have good lives or that they're not too bad. But I don't think that they actually have good lives. I think they just spend their life waiting for them to get better. They spend their time dreaming and hoping that they will be happy in the future. Or they think that if they're not happy in this life, they might be happy in the next one. But if they were honest and would look at their life for what it really is and not for what they wish it will be, they would see it's not that great. And that they've been distracted from their misery or unhappiness, wishing and hoping that tomorrow might be better. But not only in most cases will it not be better, but it will actually get worse, because sooner or later illness, old age, and death will come. To me, the people that want to justify natalism and suffering are people who want to justify the unjustifiable. They want to give value and meaning to what has none. They consider those who overcome the most suffering and tragedies as exemplary beings worthy of admiration. And they see as virtue the sadistic perpetuation of this suffering with every new birth. I am not going to have a child knowing that he can spend all or most of his life suffering or dealing with physical, mental, or emotional pain, and that he can die of cancer or diabetes, heart attack, natural disaster, Alzheimer's, pneumonia, AIDS, anorexia, hepatitis, cirrhosis, overdose, starvation, car accident, or he can drown or be murdered, poisoned, or burnt to death, or be kidnapped and tortured, etc., etc. For me, nothing justifies bringing a child into this world to suffer unnecessarily. Nothing. And it's not just about the pain this child will have to endure, but I also must take into consideration all the harm and pain that he will cause and inflict on others. Because someone is giving birth to the criminals, rapists, serial killers, bullies, animal eaters and abusers, corrupt politicians, etc. And I'm not interested in being that someone. I think that humans have a huge flaw. When we see something negative or unpleasant, we tend to think, that will never happen to me or to my children, as if we knew the future. Or, I hope that never happens to me or to my children, as if hope had any real power to stop illness, evil, tragedy, or death. And we don't seem to realize that all the people that have gone through great suffering or loss thought the exact same thing, if they even thought at all. But you are almost absolutely certain that none of the things I just mentioned are going to happen to you, right? Of course not, because those things only happen to other people, but not you. And if they do, you will either want to pray it away because you think it's that devil attacking you, or think it's a test, or see it as a blessing in disguise, etc. Anything but try to prevent the harm in the first place, because for many of you, prevention is out of the question. If the game of life is random and great harm can strike at any moment, and I obviously have no control over it, then I will not play with the life of another, since this would be highly risky and therefore irresponsible and immoral. For me, life is like the worst haunted house you can imagine, where your parents put you in without your consent, and that you are expected to love and be grateful for it, where the dramas, traumas, and calamities that present themselves along the way must be seen as part of a grand plan that you are unable to comprehend. They bought into the idea that this experience was good and necessary, and that just like everyone else, they too must also bring more humans into this world to experience what for many of us is this horror called life. And that you must not complain about it because it is, according to them, a miracle and a beautiful gift. And to finish it all off, at any moment, a long, painful, undignified, or tragic death awaits you. I ask myself, what the hell would make me want to do this to someone that I claim to love? Because the only way of protecting my children from unnecessary harm and sorrow is by not having them. Because the question is not, is my child going to suffer? But how much is my child going to suffer? And how much pain is he going to cause others? And if I don't know the answer to this question, I find it irresponsible to play Russian roulette with the life and well-being of someone else. Every year, approximately 20 million people attempt suicide, but only 1 million succeeds. This means that there is one suicide every 40 seconds or 3,000 suicides per day. I think that we can logically conclude that many more consider it, but don't have the guts or the means to do it. This tells me that millions of people are unhappy and want to die. That perhaps many of them wish they wouldn't have been born, but their parents for different reasons brought them into this world without thinking about everything their children might go through that would lead them to end their life. I find it very insulting that when someone commits suicide, people usually criticize him, saying that only a loser, a coward, or a mentally sick, twisted, and disturbed individual would do such a thing because they don't understand why anyone in their right mind would want to leave such a beautiful torture chamber. But rarely or never do they criticize or blame the abominable ones who brought him into this mess of a world to begin with. I would like to know, why are you going to have a child knowing that he can be so miserable that he'll want to end his life? Why would you put him in that predicament, knowing that we don't live in a world where whoever doesn't want to be here can leave legally and in peace? For me personally, life has been a total disaster. But even if my life was wonderful and I loved life with all my heart, that would still not give me the right to impose life on someone else because I cannot guarantee that their life will be equally fulfilling. Many people think that they will be great parents and that their kids will be smart, talented, good-looking, and have an amazing life. And that if for some reason that's not the case, that it's part of the program and that there is meaning and value in going through heartache, pain, disappointments, turmoil, etc. But if you see existence as good or necessary, then you must attempt to defend suffering, saying that it builds character and it makes you stronger, or that you can't know pleasure without knowing pain, or you simply give the most bullshit excuse ever, that it's Eve's fault, so that you can rationalize the catastrophes and all the evil and stupidity in the world. For me, pain as well as pleasure are completely unnecessary because existence is unnecessary. Therefore, there is no justification to reproduce because I cannot find any justification for the existence of suffering, torment, or pain. And because I cannot find any virtue in slavery, injustice, and torture. Perhaps humans have to lie to themselves saying that pain is good in order to make excuses for their addiction and immoral and selfish behavior of creating more humans that are going to suffer and die, knowing very well that there is absolutely no need for it, because we have nothing of benefit to offer this planet. In my opinion, human life is mostly consumption, contamination, and chaos. The fact that a human can sing, dance, or play the piano does not justify his existence, nor the great harm and destruction that he causes. I value my life not so much on the joys I experience, but on the pain that I cause others. And if I have caused pain to another, then my joys are not worth it, and my birth was unjustified. There are many people that defend natalism because they say that humans are the crowning glory of evolution, and that because of our intelligence, we have accomplished great things in technology, art, medicine, etc. And that it is imperative that this continues in order to achieve our maximum potential and greatness. These people think that someday we'll be able to eradicate or greatly minimize the bad and maximize the good, but they're unable to see that for everything we fix, many more get broken. Others think we are the supposed creation of a God that ordered us to reproduce, and therefore this justifies the continuation of human life. But the fact that humans do not know how to, can't, nor want to live in harmony with the planet and with other beings, I therefore cannot defend its existence and reproduction. It would be like defending a plague. Humans have an intellectual capacity and physical abilities that have and will continue to allow him to destroy himself, the animals, the planet, and everyone else. In humans, many times our selfishness, pride, greed, immaturity, cruelty, ignorance, fear, and stupidity seem to weigh more than our logic, reason, compassion, kindness, humility, generosity, and the desire for the common good. And in order for a human to behave in a civilized manner, you must spend an enormous amount of time and energy taming him so that he'll stop acting like a wild animal. Because the human is a primate with a bit more intelligence and consciousness, but very few have the sufficient rationality and emotional maturity to use them for good. And many use their intelligence to control and abuse others. So if I know this, I am not going to give life to a being that is nothing more than an irrational and selfish animal that I will have to spend years taming in order to avoid the maximum harm possible that he can cause himself and others. I don't think it's a coincidence that many of the ones we call enlightened or wise ones throughout history don't or didn't have children. It seems as if the more ignorant or uneducated you are, the more children you tend to have, because you are more likely to be ruled or influenced by religion, society, fear, selfishness, etc., and not by logic and reason. I want to clarify that in no way am I saying that life is only suffering. I know that there are good and beautiful things, but in my opinion, the harms outweigh the benefits every time and in every way. So by no stretch of the imagination could I ever say this experience is worth it. I never thought that having kids was a good idea, because when I stopped to consider the gains and the losses, the pleasures and the pains, I knew that the possibility of something disastrous happening to my child was much greater and devastating than all the magical or wonderful things that he may or may not get to experience. And I knew it was not wise to participate in this bloody, senseless, tragic, and cruel game. I am an anti-natalist because I don't think we are the crowning glory of evolution. I think that we are its greatest mistake. Okay, everyone, that's it for today. I will leave some links in the description box of some of the disorders and illnesses I mentioned so that you please go check them out. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day. Bye.